Welcome back to the Professional Lovers Channel.
And we are so glad that you are joining us here and that everything worked perfectly tonight with us watching the show when it was supposed to be. And so we are feeling really good. You know that we're Patty and Al. We've been married 28 years. We like talking about couple issues as filtered through the lens of Married at First Sight.
Relationships.
Yes, so that's what we do. And we're happy when you talk back with us. So keep the feedback coming. And not a whole lot of different tonight.
No.
The main difference is that the experts finally showed up.
Yeah. And we were talking about whether or not this particular season we've just seen less of the experts up to this point. I don't know if that's necessarily the case.
I think it is.
Because we definitely see where there has been a need up to this point where their interaction would have, kind of assisted in a number of different ways.
But they showed up tonight, and we're glad.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the basis of the conversation, because the issues that the couples have been dealing with, we've talked about week in and week out.
True.
Because they have not changed.
There's been some consistency there.
Absolutely. So we'll start with Katina and Elijah Wan.
Mm-hmm.
Katina talked to Pastor Cal. Elijah Wan talked to Dr. Pepper. Had some fireworks there. And of course the question are there still questions you have, or what questions do you need answered in order to say yes on decision day? And they've asked this question in past seasons, so that question is not.
I think that's every season,
right? So for Katina, in talking about how the issue between her and Elijah Wan and the app and all that kind of stuff, and how he we talked about how he reacts before he actually thinks about how he's coming across. Pastor Cal suggested that she ask him about his triggers.
Yeah.
And maybe there are some private things that he hasn't shared with her that could shed light on why he tends to react in a volatile manner before thinking about
how it's coming across.
Right. And saying whatever he says. And then he asked about their intimacy. The fact that their intimacy has not advanced. Asked her why. And she said because she wants to really be in love with him. She doesn't want to base intimacy on lust.
Right. Which I was surprised at the response because, again, and it definitely makes sense. When you're married, lust with your spouse is kind of natural and almost expected.
I don't know if I agree with that.
Well, the desire.
Okay.
Yeah.
But lust is very...
well, it's looked upon as being crude because it's usually in a situation where it's not
a committed
expected, or it's not looked upon favorably because it's outside of a natural relationship.
But we did say that in the case of Married at First Sight, if you don't have that emotional connection to where, and if you have had a past where all you operated from was lust,
physical, yeah,
then in this situation they're wanting a different vibe. And and that's both of them.
Yeah.
Now, of course, this is assuming that they really haven't had sex, but we always find out that the couples who say they haven't had sex were actually having sex all along and just didn't want to say on camera. But
dizzy.
So yes, Pastor Cal said, well, in marriage, lust is okay. But I understand where she's coming from in this situation because, yes, I'm married, but I still am not sure.
Right.
And he said, if you're not wanting to advance in intimacy, it's because you still have doubt. And she still has doubt.
Yeah. Yeah. Because again, the saying that you only get one chance at a first impression, in a situation like this, when you are growing and knowing someone or growing and getting to know someone, when you hit a chord that, somehow is very sensitive, it's very difficult to back up from that and get past it. I mean, because that's what really has to be done. When you're just dating, you back up from it and you go in a different direction. But in this case, you're married, so you have to get through that situation and build a strengthened bond that whatever that was cannot affect the future of the relationship. So, where trust and vulnerability eventually grows when it's compromised at any point in the beginning of a relationship, it just makes it a little more difficult to get over that hump. But if you're committed, you will. But again, you have to be, especially if you're the one that created the situation, you have to be a little bit more patient to allow your partner, your spouse, to heal.
One thing I find interesting about Elijah, though, because he talks the talk.
He talks a lot.
He talks the talk. He gives Katina all the kudos, and I love our marriage, and I love who she is, and she's a beautiful woman. But I'm not in love. I don't love her, and he's quick to throw that out. Yeah. I don't love her. Now it's interesting that he said, love is a deep word, but you throw it out there.
Yeah.
I love our marriage. I love her. I love who she is. She's a beautiful woman, the best character. She makes me question myself every day, but I don't love her. I'm not in love.
That's ego refusing to accept it.
It's fear.
Yeah.
It's just straight up fear.
You can't be macho and still be in love.
Yeah. So it's a little contradictory, Olajuwon, but But as Business Office reminds us, at least has reminded us over the past 2 weeks, it's producer staged. Elijah's drama is producer staged.
Yeah.
And if it is, okay. And if it's not, it's okay too, because he still provides us things to talk about. Issues to talk about that are not unfamiliar.
True. No, they're real issues.
Because some personality types.
He's real. I think he's extremely genuine. It's just that he's been given a platform to be as genuine as he wants to be. So I don't think how he's coming across is a put on in any way.
I don't either. And his genuineness got him into a little sticky situation, which we'll address at the end. Lindsay and Mark, we know what their issue is. They talk at each other.
Yeah.
Neither one listens to each other. But what was really clear tonight is that their reactions to each other are triggered by each other's past.
History. Yeah.
Lindsay is triggered by her past and the emotional abuse that she received and the never feeling. She said she always feels sad. And that's just not always sad with Mark. That's just sad in her life, period.
Life has been sad for her.
Right. And then Mark is triggered by her yelling because of how his mom used to yell at his dad. And Cal
asked a pointed question
about whether or not he felt like
your dad.
Right. He was like his dad. And that was
that hit a nerve.
It hit a huge nerve.
Because he was feeling like his dad. He was feeling himself shut down and closed off. All of what was negative about what he was being confronted with. And it was not a good feeling. And that's what he was being reminded of. And him being reminded caused him to go into a place that he was familiar with just from observation, which was his dad shutting down. So his manner of dealing with this situation, because it is what it is, let's just shut down.
And so them triggering each other is never going to change the outcome that they're and give them the outcome that they're looking for.
True. And we use a word that we believe in because that's how we relate to one another. And it's being other centered. And it's where you initiate your thought with the other person in mind.
Right.
It's never I or my. And even if that is something that you have in your ultimate outcome, how am I going to get, or what is it that I need, or whatever the case may be, to get there is almost like you have to go through your spouse, because your happiness is not contingent on it being provided by your spouse, but it makes the road to get there so much easier.
And none of these couples are operating from an other-centered perspective.
Yeah, that's
they
obvious.
are strictly operating really from a self-centered perspective.
And I mean, it's understandable. They started off, I mean, literally less than 2 months ago, well, according to timing, 6 weeks ago, they were single. They only had to be concerned with themselves.
Right.
You know, that wasn't a way of life for them. And now you have to be cognizant of another individual. Not just another individual, your spouse.
Your spouse.
Yeah.
Your wife, your husband.
I mean, they have a position in your life. And that's kind of interesting. I mean, they have a position in your life.
Well, and that goes along with, the single mindset versus the married mindset. And they're all still trying to develop a married mindset. Some have it more than the others, but they're also trying to develop that married mindset. So Lindsay talked to Dr. Pepper. She made a statement: anger is not your friend in this marriage. And gave her questions to ask Mark, which she did. And he answered them. And then asked questions of her about, why she's so aggressive in her, in her communication style. And why does she purposely try to hurt him? Yeah. And of course, it's because she's hurting.
Yeah.
And when she's hurting,
you need to feel what
just
I
like
feel.
he said, it's like she needs him to feel
what she feels,
what she's feeling, and she does that with her mouth and her attitude and the constant, you don't do this, you don't do this, you don't do this, I'm leaving. And he said, you keep throwing that out there. And
cry
she,
wolf
and
once too many times.
and that is should never be a threat that you just use repeatedly.
Don't let that be an idle threat, because there will come a time where you won't have somebody to say it to.
Yeah. And I think that a couple of principles in our book, Becoming a Professional Lover, which we will like to acknowledge that Pastor Cal uses as well. And we'll show you how he did that.
Yes.
But frequent words of praise keep happiness and joy alive. And that's something that Lindsay and Mark don't do enough of.
Affirm each other.
They do not affirm each other. It's always about what you're not doing.
Right.
And after a while,
it gets tiring to hear.
Right.
Right.
And that's why he calls it nagging. That's why it comes out as criticism all the time. But they are not listening to each other, and they're not really understanding each other's needs. But they individually have stuff they need to work out.
True.
Which would help to create a different vibe in their relationship if they work their own individual issues out. Noy and Steve, this is where Pastor Cal made a statement that reflects directly one of the principles in the book.
Directly.
Because we know that Noy's issue with financial security is triggered by what she experienced coming up.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked about how if Steve just sat down and laid out a plan for her, that it would probably satisfy the need. But I feel like he's still kind of tone deaf when it comes to her need. And the need is financial security.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this tip before, that you have to love your spouse in the way that he or she needs to be loved.
Feel loved.
And Noy needs to know without the shadow of a doubt
she needs a plan,
that she has financial security with Steve.
Yeah.
And you and I kind of got into it a little bit because of the language he's using. When he sat down and said, okay, let's go over a plan.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he did say one option is getting a full-time job, but there are other options, you know, of
entrepreneurial ventures.
Right, and I've done entrepreneurial things before.
Which I don't, in his verbiage, again, he's a sales engineer, so he understands his verbiage. And most folks, when they hear that, entrepreneurial ventures in the past, basically is saying that he has owned his own business.
Yes.
I don't know if Noy comprehends those words as he's saying them.
But as I said, what you had doesn't speak to right now. You can say, I have owned my own businesses, but you ain't owning one right now.
But what's to say, and again, I mean, we go back and forth. What's to say that he's not getting residual income from what he has already generated?
And if he has, he just needs to show her that on paper in his bank account.
She is stranger. She don't need to know all my finances.
Oh, no. She is a wife who needs financial security.
You don't need to know everything now.
She needs it. And this is what I was saying. In a plan, you say, okay, I can contribute for this many months right now, the way I am right now. And during this many months, I will be exploring and putting together the foundation of another business, consulting, whatever, at development, whatever the case may be. And by this, I will be generating this much money a month to where you don't have to worry. How simple is that?
If he doesn't know the detail in which he has to express that to her, then it evidently is a problem.
It's a problem then. Because if Keisha got to tell him the figure she came up with is $40,000, and he tells Keisha, hey, then we're good.
Then we're good.
You saying that to the wrong person.
But
you're telling the wrong person that.
But why is it that Noy can't tell him what she needs? Because, again, from Noy, he needs to have a job. I need to be financially secure that he's going to be able to take care of me. Okay, and I'm just using it, not that she needs to be taken care of, but she wants security. I understand that. His situation, and it's just as simple as Keisha asked the question, how much? She can express how much she needs to see in the expenses of their
Yes,
monthly,
she can.
you know.
She could ask those questions. She indicated that she hadn't because they were uncomfortable for her. And while she can ask those questions, he can also answer them without that specific question being asked because he knows her need. He knows her need.
Well, the other side of that particular couple is his issue with her social media.
Yeah.
You know, so there's a certain part of him not being all that secure as well. You know, and I don't know. That might have some part in
Why
him
he's not as forthcoming?
Yeah,
Because it may end up on social media. Now,
yeah.
she showed her self-centeredness
Woof, woof, woof.
in that discussion about social media because he expressed how uncomfortable her broadcasting their issues on social media makes him feel. Pastor Cal said, that's not cool to do that without talking about it with your spouse first and kind of getting some agreement, permission to do that.
Yeah.
And she basically said,
no,
Pastor Cal,
you're you.
You're you, I'm me, my social media, I'll make the decision about what I post. Not cool.
Very uncool.
Not cool. That is a single mindset. That is not a married mindset, and it's self-centered.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't ever live your life out loud when it involves your spouse.
Yeah, someone else.
And issues that you're going through. If it's all about you and you only, that's one thing. But if it's involving your spouse and your children, and you haven't kind of cleared that with your spouse and agree on how much you share, what would be the boundaries, how you share it to make sure that the spouse and the kids are not uncomfortable with everybody knowing and then commenting on your business without getting the full story, because you're only getting one side of the story when you're posting on social media.
I mean, how many times do you need to get a call? You okay, man? I saw this post. Not
cool. And so you really do, that whole social media discussion needs to become needs to be a discussion between you and your spouse, to where you're both comfortable with how much you share. Because people will give you their opinion, and a lot of times if social media is a big deal to you, you care about the opinions, and you really shouldn't.
Because it's your relationship is really none of anybody else's business.
None of anybody else's business. Exactly. Unless you're going to an expert to get some counseling.
Yeah. And then that's just between y'all.
Right. So, last couple, Jasmina and Michael, they seem to be in the best place this week.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're about to get off the runway and maybe take flight a little bit.
Little bit.
But they're moving in the right direction. I mean, the communication, the level of vulnerability, the open expression verbally, in the manner in which they're communicating about, trust. I think all of that has been a turning point where once the experts asked certain questions, that both of them kind of like were almost like shuffling a deck of cards. They were like leaning on each other to kind of intertwine their expectations of the relationship, or what they're putting an effort toward improving upon the relationship.
And so, Jasmine is concerned that she doesn't feel anything
because he ain't making
through
her feel
physical intimacy.
Well,
no kind of touching. I think I hope that she realized in her conversation with Dr. Pepper and then with Michael that can grow.
Yeah. Well, Michael understood with the questions and the conversation that he had with Pastor Cal, that he was doing things naturally that, initially it was through obligation, but then the obligation felt more of a desire to do for, that other-centered
Right.
bent or lean. Whereas in the beginning, she was doing the same thing. And
with the physical touch.
And he told her that you didn't have to do that. You don't have to do that. And Pastor Cal was like, that was a dumb move. That was a dumb move. I'm just going to be
just because...
Because she was going through the same thing.
Exactly.
I mean, she was going through obligation. And eventually it would have got to a point that if she didn't want to do it, she would stop. But eventually it would be a desire, a natural lean toward doing it for you, not just to you.
And there's a way to do it, stroking the arm, just grabbing a hand, or just touching the arm, or, just little touches like that help to fuel connection.
Back of the head.
And that's all they need to start with, and it would grow. And of course, it ended with Pastor Cal and Dr. Pepper spying on the couples as they played volleyball. And then Elijah Wan put his foot in his mouth again.
Yes, he does.
Talking about that his session with Dr. Pepper was
90%
pretty much
wasted.
A waste of time. And then they came out, and she said, yeah, heard the conversation. And he was like, but in the after party, and I have to agree with him in that, from what we saw, he felt like she was going on hearsay, and that she was harping on things that had happened in the past, that they had moved or grown from. Yeah. And that made him upset. And I understand that, because she did not ask really.
But if, again,
in an expert way.
Well, no, I can't even say that, because again, him being as defensive as he is.
Yeah.
He just harped on, well, you're making me look like the bad person. She wasn't completed, with what she was saying. She was saying that this was where it was. This is how, we heard it, because we have it on film anyway. So it's not just hearsay, as he wants to portray it. Where have you moved on from then? But she never got a chance to ask that part of it. Again, she's a professional. Her purpose was not to just blam him.
And that came out in the last scene when they were there with all the couples, and she addressed.
And she didn't throw him under the bus after knowing what he said minutes before.
So, but it'll be interesting to see. They've got 2 weeks left now.
Yeah, I'm interested in seeing what's going on next week.
Yeah, because
folks trying to jump out of moving cars and stuff.
So we'll see. Until then, we tell you to stay safe
and enjoy.
Peace.
Take care.